Este es un podcast de la Facultad de Derecho de la UNAM.
En una época en que la posverdad y el algoritmo son la última palabra, te damos la bienvenida a un espacio de diálogo y tolerancia en el que la duda es el comienzo de las respuestas. Sociedad en crisis, entre el orden y el caos, una visión multidisciplinaria del derecho para el siglo XXI, es un podcast de difusión de la Facultad de Derecho de la UNAM para personas interesadas en temas de actualidad.
Querido auditorio, les damos la bienvenida a este podcast Sociedad en crisis, entre el orden y el caos. Agradecemos a nuestra directora, la doctora Sonia Venegas Álvarez, y a la Facultad de Derecho de la UNAM por este espacio. El día de hoy tenemos a una invitada de lujo, la profesora Nancy Fraser, que no requiere mayor presentación. Welcome, dear Nancy. Thank you for being here.
I'm very happy to be here. Thank you.
I am start with the first question. In your work, you distinguish between corporate feminists and feminists for the 99%. What is the key difference?
Well, as those numbers suggest, the 1% is for the benefit of those women who already enjoy very substantial advantages in our society, educational advantages, financial advantages, professional advantages. And that feminism adopts what I would call a discrimination paradigm. It thinks that the only thing that is keeping women down is prejudice so that they can't get hired for the best jobs. In effect, what their idea of equality is, equality, women should be equal to the men of their class. That's not real, full social equality. It doesn't really help the overwhelming majority of women who are much poorer, who lack those advantages, who are from the working class or the lower middle class, whatever you want to call it. So I think over the years we've seen that although feminism has changed a lot of thinking in a very positive way, materially it hasn't delivered a huge amount of gains for the overwhelming majority of women, especially in a neoliberal time where everybody's living conditions are deteriorating so badly, except for, okay, maybe it's more than 1%, the 10%, let's say, the professional managerial strata and the rich. They're doing great, but everybody else is in trouble. So you need a feminism that really understands that and focuses on the condition of the majority. And for that, you need to get beyond the discrimination paradigm and think about what equality, including gender equality, means in a deeper way.
Dear Nancy, thank you so much for being here at UNAM Law School. It's a pleasure having you here. And on your perspective, what is the biggest challenge for feminism today? Economic inequality, cultural backlash, or political polarization?
Well, it's pretty hard to actually rank those things because they're all very tightly interconnected. I think that what's going on now is like a general crisis of the whole civilization, of the whole social order. And I think the problem of trying to pick out and say this is the thing to focus on is not going to help. I think we need to think more deeply about how the social order is organized and, look for deeper structural transformations. And you don't want to get into these arguments about what has priority over what, because people live in different conditions, in different situations. We're not all in the same boat exactly, even though we are all victims of this system. We are victims in different ways. And so really, you don't want to tell somebody that your problem is not as important as your problem. What you want to do is say all of these problems are connected to one social system. And so what I'm saying holds for feminists, but it holds for everybody. It holds for environmentalists, it holds for anti-racists, it holds for anti-authoritarians. I mean, we have to think about the social system rather than our own political angle on it. But that doesn't mean that you give up the gender perspective. Absolutely not. It demands to understand that you can understand the whole social order without a gender perspective. But I'm talking about getting beyond ranking things to think in a more systematic way.
Nancy, there is one situation about the feminism, what is happening right now, because from the critical theory we could observe that the model of production, it is linked with the resistance discourses. But right now we are watching, we are observing that the neoliberalism, it's everywhere. Is it confronting, or is it it has some intervention from neoliberalism in the lines of the feminism, or how it doesn't work?
Well, you know, several years ago, I coined the phrase progressive neoliberalism, and so most people, when they hear that, they think it's a contradiction in terms. Neoliberalism is regressive, reactionary. How could it be progressive? But from what I can see, in many countries, maybe not everywhere, but in many countries, including the US, the UK, Germany, you know, lots of important countries, neoliberalism as a real policy regime was consolidated not by the right wing, but by the centrist Democrats in the US, or people who call them social democrats in Europe, the Blairite Labour Party in the UK. These are the people who actually, let's say, you know, deregulated Wall Street, created the WTO, and all of these institutions that have financialized the whole world economy and really, you know, just turned everything over to capital and made everybody else's life a hell. So, so feminism in many places, not everywhere, and maybe less so in Latin America than in the US and Europe, feminism, especially this liberal corporate feminism we were just speaking about, really became allied. Let me talk about the U.S. With the Clinton wing of the U.S. Democratic Party. And so that party was like, you know, deregulating Wall Street and like talking feminism and anti-racism and gay and lesbian rights and green this and that. But because it was allied to this neoliberal political economy, it was kind of a sham. It could only benefit, as we were just saying, the 1 or the 10% of the supposed beneficiaries. And I think that what I had always hoped to see, and which I think is happening to some degree, maybe not enough, is that that we'd have more of a fight within feminism. Are you for the 1% or the 99%? Even though, of course, those numbers, that's a little, okay, hyperbolic, let's say. But still, so there are lots. I would say the liberal wings, the liberal meritocratic discrimination wing of all the emancipatory social movements became de facto allied as junior partners within this progressive neoliberal bloc, and they lended a kind of emancipatory veneer, the appearance that this was all progressive and emancipatory, to what was really, at bottom, a very regressive upward redistribution of wealth and destruction of political capacity to regulate the economy. That's how I see it.
Okay, Nancy, thank you very much for being here. Welcome to Mexico, welcome to UNAM, welcome to our faculty. I extend you my gratitude for sharing your time and your insights with us. And I have a lot of questions, but I will start with a little one, but I think it's huge in the answer. What does social justice mean in today's world?
Yeah. Well, I think that social justice, we can talk at the level of ideal theory, what are the principles of justice in general as a universal idea, or we can talk about it in a more contextual and historical way as what does it mean to overcome the specific forms of injustice that we are experiencing today. And if you take that second sense, then you are really thinking about justice as emancipation, as overcoming injustice. So we have to look at the kinds of injustices that are rampant in the world, that are pressing, and it's very clear. I in an earlier stage of my work, talked about the distinction between injustices of distribution, where things are so wildly skewed in terms of who has access to the basic resources that you need to live a good life. That's one form of injustice that is absolutely pervasive. And so we need one aspect of pursuing social justice is to overcome that. And to do that, as I indicated earlier, by really transforming the deep structure that generates that vast injustice on the distributive front. But secondly, there are injustices that a lot of philosophers and legal theorists and others are calling misrecognition, where there are hierarchies of respect. Who is a real citizen? Who is a second-class person? Who is a real subject? Who is an other, right? And here we get into this question that Roberto raised about the cultural hierarchies of respect and esteem. And here we see, especially gender, issues of race, color, ethnicity, religion, all of these, sexuality, all of these hierarchies come into play there. But in my view, it's very important to connect those to the distributive injustices and not to just treat them as a freestanding problem of bad ideas in people's head. It's not just bad ideas in people's head. If you go that way, you think that justice requires policing people's thoughts, going after bad thinkers. It's not that it's completely wrong, but it's not helpful. We really want to look at the way hierarchies of value and respect are institutionalized in our social practices, in the ways we organize family life and work and so on and so forth. It's not just about people's heads. It's what we do, social practice. And then finally, I hope I'm not going on too long, there are injustices of voice, of ability to act and speak and be heard and have a real say in the decisions that govern your life conditions. So now we're talking about the political side of it, the economic, the cultural, the political. And those are injustices, you could say, of misrepresentation. So we have maldistribution, misrecognition, misrepresentation, and in every case, what we're trying to do then is combat injustice on all those three fronts. Now, the hardest part is to figure out what the positive, alternative is. And again, we can say abstractly that it's, in my view, I use the phrase parity of participation, meaning that people have what they need in terms of resources, in terms of respect, in terms of efficacious political voice to function as peers, to interact on terms of parity or equality with others. That's one answer to the sort of what does it mean to overcome these. That's debated. Other philosophers will give you other answers, but the thing that's most important, I think, is diagnosing the forms of injustice, understanding are there deep structural bases in the society, what has to be changed. And then you get this notion of what Hegelians would call determinate negation. We change what is bad now. And we hope that we don't, in the process, generate new bad things for the future, although I have to say that almost every successful effort to overcome one set of injustices has ended up generating some new ones. But let's worry about that later.
Thank you.
Professor Nancy, in your recent work, you use the term cannibal capitalism. What does that mean?
Cannibal capitalism? Yes. Well, what I mean is a system that is organized in such a way that powerful economic actors are given, let's say, the license, the right to prey upon others, and especially to prey upon the forms of social wealth that are constituted as non-economic, as outside the economy. I think the easiest one maybe to think about is nature. So we basically have given the power to people like Elon Musk and Jeff Bezos and all the AI guys, Sam Altman, all of them. We've turned over our relation to nature for them to design and to manage. They are licensed, in effect, to, and earlier it would be the industrialists, right? There were Henry Fords and so on and so forth. That we've given them, in every phase of capitalism, the right to just help themselves to whatever's around that they need, whether we're talking about coal or other forms of energy, clear in the case of energy. And so what if they spew fumes into the atmosphere and we have so many greenhouse gas emissions that we can't breathe and the earth is burning up? So what? They have no responsibility to repair what they damage or to pay for what they take. That's cannibalization. That is about the powerful actors in the economy having the right to cannibalize the conditions that all of us need to live. And you could say exactly a parallel, analogous thing about their relation to what feminists call care work, right? To the social energies that we have to take care of each other, to generate and nurture and socialize new human beings, new generations, to replenish the already working generations, to take care of the older generations. This takes enormous social energy and creativity and commitment. But these guys, these tech guys, let's say, tech bros, let's call them, they just take for granted that they'll have all the labor forces they need. They don't give a hoot about who's working to kind of create those labor forces and socialize and educate them. And so, that's, they push for, budgetary austerity to cut back public social services. They lower wages so that a household needs more than one wage earner, meaning now women have to be full-time workers too. So all of this puts enormous pressure on those energies for care and social reproduction. That's cannibalization also. And we could, give you some other analogies, but let's leave it at that for now. Okay.
Thank you. Dear Nancy, this book of carnivalist capitalism, I think that is one of your greatest contribution to humanity. And building on that point, Nancy, I would like to know, for you, which is the biggest illusion that people have about capitalism today, and how, basically I'm trying to ask you, do you think that capitalism sell to people that they should be like this in order to this? so that they feel that they are free, but at the end they are not free. They are contributing for those people who oppress them indirectly, like these big tech companies, what Antonio Rankin called cultural hegemony. What are your thoughts about it?
Yeah, I think here I would start by distinguishing a period of relative normality versus a period of acute crisis. In periods of relative normality, you're right that the sort of establishment thinking, which is largely shaped by a kind of liberal individualism, and that has a lot of credibility, and people might actually believe, or at least not everyone, but enough people actually believe that what they need to try to do is kind of improve their situation within the existing terms. So they look for piecemeal reforms, and that's normal politics. And during that kind of time, something like what Gramsci called hegemony works. It's relatively secure. Dissent is sort of at the margins. It doesn't really, kind of accumulate in a way that's threatening. Now, crisis periods are completely different. These are times when the system has unraveled to the extent that, in one way or another, and as I said before, differently for different people, but in one way or another, the conditions for a good life are really deteriorated and not there. And then you start to get people who defect from the ruling common sense, and they think it can't go on like this. They may try for a while to elect leaders who will promise, some set of gradual reforms, but they see that isn't the solution. So they start to look for more radical changes. They want to think outside the box. They want to try something completely new. And then you're not in a situation of hegemony anymore. They don't believe the liberal common sense, work hard and your children will have a better life than you have. They know their children's lives are not going to be as good as theirs. And that's a huge rupture in the whole social contract that held things together. So that's the kind of time we're in now, in my opinion. And in this kind of time, it's a wild time. It's a chaotic time. It's a time that has a very strange mix of hope and horrible fear. The worst forms of fascistic authoritarianism, scapegoating and persecuting, the target of the day, and on the other side, the appearance of actors or parties or political movements that, in my view, are zeroing in on what are, I think, the real deep cause of these troubles. The deep cause of these troubles, I don't even think I really have to say this, but I will, are not, Mexican rapists invading the United States, dark-skinned immigrants who are eating our pets, trans people. These are not the reasons why the Rust Belt and working class lives are deteriorating. But that is what one response to this crisis is. And unfortunately, it's the one that has become, it holds the levers of power now in the United States and in several other countries. Fortunately, not here in Mexico. But we also have, let me stick to the US, Bernie Sanders, Zoran Mamdani, Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez. We have other forces that are offering different diagnoses of what the problem is and different prognoses to how you improve things. So I don't think we have that kind of hegemony now. I think we have this wild scene without a center that's holding things together.
Well, I like to go in that line, Nancy. I remember when I was working in the epistemologies of the South that we are trying to discover another alternatives of knowledges, political knowledges, practices, ontologies, to reconcentrate or refocus the strength to rebuild the democracy. And particularly, it was in certain way few specific cases with the autonomies, indigenous people, etc. But right now, following the idea of these illusions that keep on going with the superstructure, what is happening from your work in your criteria about the democracy, neoliberalism, and movements from below?
Well, I have to say, and here I want to be careful because your situation in Mexico is quite different from ours. You have a president who, is actually living in reality and who, it really wants to make things better. That's not our situation, obviously. So, and in the U.S., the leading power, the leading institutions of civil society have actually capitulated to Trump. The universities that were falsely attacked for anti-Semitism in order to crush protests in solidarity with Palestinians, those universities, the major ones, the Ivy League ones, the famous ones, the very rich ones, simply made private deals with Trump. All sorts of law firms did the same. Media institutions did the same. The lesson I draw from that: don't rely on bourgeois courage to defend bourgeois democracy. It's got to come from below in our situation. That's the only place where there can be any help. And in the end, that's probably the case in many, many places. And eventually there are periods where you can get a kind of alliance of elite reformers. I think of the American New Deal, Roosevelt, and so on, the Communist Party, the CIO. This happens. I don't actually see, with the exception of, I keep saying Mexico and maybe Brazil at this point. It's very hard to find examples that you can even get up to 5 on. But with those few exceptions, I don't see today much evidence of what we used to call it in the New Left, an enlightened ruling class who would make a deal with the working class. The ruling class has lost whatever enlightenment it has, it seems to me. So what I am hoping for is some kind of a scaled up, alliance, let's go back to the Gramsci language, the counter-hegemonic bloc, the historic bloc, that would include indigenous peoples and feminist movements and labor unions and care workers and environmentalists. But in this case, going back to this question of Isabel, these would have to be the environmentalists for the 99%, by definition, the indigenous, I suppose, are for the 99%, and the labor unions that have learned that you can't just protect the sort of elite fractions of the working class who are in industry because they're all being devastated. You have to ally with the unorganized, with the workers who have not had that level of freedom and security. So I think that those are the democratic forces. Those are the forces for social justice, and the difficulty is how to think about what it would mean to construct a much broader alliance of them. And I actually think back to the heyday of the Zapatistas and of the Alter globalization movement, the World Social Forum. I mean, because this was really a global thing. And now we have to kind of reinvent something like that, because whatever opposition that we have, and it's very good, tends to be within a national territorial state. I mean, all the good examples I mentioned are all, focused on U.S. politics. They have international sentiments, but they don't have any way of actually, putting those into action, really.
Nancy, in that way, and following Gramsci's great phrase, the old is dying and the new cannot be born, how should social movements organize to be effective? I mean, to let that new born.
Yes. Well, first of all, there's only so much theorists and intellectuals can say about that, because the enormous creativity of people on the ground far exceeds the things that we can sort of predict. I mean, just look, forgive me if I keep going back to the US, just look at the people of the city of Minneapolis, Minnesota, who suddenly rose up in a magnificent cross-ethnic, class coalition, and just put their bodies on the line to stop ICE. You couldn't have designed this sitting in an armchair, So at a certain level, I think the issue is that these things are happening because people have courage, because they have imagination and creativity, and they care, they have passion. Now, what I think people like me, who are intellectuals, academics, and so on, people like you, I think what we can do is try to create a kind of analysis that connects the dots. What is the relation between that magnificent struggle in Minneapolis and, movements of peasants without land, let's say, or Via Campesina, or, these things, they all are, the problems they're addressing all arise from within one social system. It's a social system that, in its very DNA, is primed to divide people, to make it look like, oh, you have this problem over here, you have this problem, these have nothing to do with each other. But in fact, they're all connected. And so I think what we can do, what I try to do, is connect the dots. And to the degree that people on the ground see those connections, they will be more inclined to make alliances, to coordinate more what they do with what others are doing, to figure out, and this is the most important thing, who are your real allies and potentially, and who are your enemies. That's very important. So, you can't, at some point, I suppose, these movements will need to have some kind of way of being together in a political party.
Okay.
At some point, maybe not now, as things develop, who knows? Obviously not what we used to call a Leninist party, but some kind of a party that I think is a party of the whole working class in all of its different forms, but and that is built on recognition of the differentiations within it and the different needs and situations of different segments of that class.
Thank you.
Dear Nancy, for younger generation, what should be the feminist movement priority today?
I'm sorry, could you repeat it?
Sí, for younger generation, what should be the feminist movement's top priority today?
Yeah, I think here I want to sort of make the same answer I did earlier to Roberto, that I'm a little bit skeptical about prioritizing this and that across the board, because if you think about the situation, you know, of women in parts of sub-Saharan Africa, in Mexico, in the United States, in countries living under Islamic regimes and so on, there are different things that are going to be seen as the first thing we have to do. But I guess at another level, I would say that what we need is a feminism of the left, in which young people who are becoming feminists, who are being radicalized, are reading and thinking about capitalism and how the struggles over gender, right, are situated in and fit within a capitalist society, and therefore how they need to broaden their thinking beyond the single issue gender perspective. Now, I think that has been going on already for a long time in much of Latin America. It's been slower to develop in the very wealthy countries of the global north, where we got this single issue feminism. So you guys are ahead of the game here, and we have a lot to learn from you. To me, that would be the most important thing, is to really develop a feminism that from the outset is, and I'll use the popular buzzword that everyone uses, that is intersectional. That's so important. I don't read as much of Latin feminism as I should, but for me, one thinker who I think illustrates this in a very beautiful way is the Argentine feminist Veronica Gago. But there are many others, I'm sure. Yeah.
Nancy, following that criteria, you know, there is one lemma, general lemma in the manifestations or the collectives of feminism that say that if it's not feminism, will not be revolutionary, or the revolution will not be happen. But particularly right now, the principal problems of our nowadays, it is related with the ecological problems. And the thing that I want to ask to you is the role that play the technologies through the feminism to protect the nature and the ecological topics.
Right. Well, I think that the first thing I want to say is that if you, again, think about this in a somewhat analytical way, you can see how connected the struggle to protect nature is with the struggle to safeguard the whole process of human social reproduction, right? Social societies live in habitats. When their habitats are endangered, the whole form of life is endangered. The ability of caregivers, and let's, you know, acknowledge that we're talking, you know, more about women. I don't want to say that men don't do care work, they do, but it is a female gendered activity, and it overwhelmingly falls on the shoulders of women. So it's women's ability to keep a community together, not just their own children, but the community and so on. That's all entangled with the importance of protecting the habitat. I'm very interested in the work of the thought of a great Catalan ecological thinker, Joan Martínez Alier, who wrote a great book. The title is not, I don't like it today, but it was called The Environmentalism of the Poor. And he was talking about how you couldn't separate out the struggle, environmental struggle to protect nature from the defense of the community, of the way of life, of livelihood. These are all intertwined. And it's only in the other kind of environmentalism, we could call it the environmentalism of the rich, that people think that protecting nature is not connected to livelihood and social reproduction and all that other stuff. And that's really like the feminism of the 1%. That's the environment. People who don't have to worry about these things think, oh, nature. But in fact, it's untangled completely. So that's an argument for, and I would say, just one other point, that women have always been in the forefront of this kind of environmentalism, always, and are today. So there are very close connections between ecological struggles and feminist struggles. And that's why we have this whole movement of ecofeminism and, so people see the connections. And I think that's great, and I would encourage that. And by the same way, we also have the whole problematic of, I'm just blocking for a second on the phrase that I want, environmental racism. Yeah, again, the entanglement, the historic treatment of, this goes back to cannibalization, of communities of color as the perfect dumping grounds for any toxic stuff you generate. The disparate impact on communities of color and people of color. So all of these things are very interconnected, and that's really the best I can do with that.
Nancy, I have to ask, what does populism means to you? And how can we face not to being cheated by populists and that they don't came out with cat for her?
So, first of all, I don't like a certain kind of liberal, I would call ideology, that instantly, without looking closely, just says all populism is bad and authoritarian and anti-democratic. Keep away from it. I think there are different kinds of populisms, and we have to carefully distinguish. And I would say, for our time, that we could distinguish between left or left-leaning forms of populism and real right-wing authoritarian populisms. And whereas the second easily can become fascistic if they're not already, the left ones, or the left-leaning ones, have the possibility to develop in what I would call a more democratic socialist orientation, which I support. So don't lump them all together. That's number one. And let me just mention how I distinguish left and right populism, because I think that there's things to be said here. Right-wing populism imagines that the social order has three levels. There are the blood-sucking elites at the top, there are the free-riding underclass at the bottom, and there are the virtuous people in the middle, and we have to wage a double war against the elites and the underclass. And this turns out to be, that business of the Mexican rapists and the immigrants eating the cats and all. This is scapegoating. So now, left-wing populism, like that 1%, 99, has a dual picture. There's the 1% and the 99%. Now, from a sociological point of view, that's not very sophisticated, 1%, 99, but it's a lot closer to the truth than the idea that the racialized underclass is screwing us. A lot closer to the truth. So I think you can work with the second version, with the left version. And secondly, right-wing populism gives a very concrete identitarian, let's say almost cultural description of the bad guys. I just name them, the Mexican rapists, and so on and so forth. Left-wing populism, it's not perfect, but it it identifies the enemy more in functional terms. What is their role in society? Not what are their religious traits or their, So we occupy Wall Street. Wall Street is a lot closer than, trans people. So now it's true that Wall Street historically can slide into Jewish bankers, and we don't want to go there. But I think that these are important differences, and they tell you which versions of populism you can work with. But having said that, I'm against the idea of writing off as utterly hopeless and impossible a huge chunk of, say, Trump voters, the working class portion of Trump's voting base. Some of them, I'm sure, are principled card-carrying racists. I want nothing to do with them. But others are what I would call opportunistic racists. They will vote for a racist if there's no other, let's say, populist anti-elite candidate on the ballot. And we know from voting analyses that in the upper Midwest, in previous elections, many people who voted for Bernie Sanders in primaries then voted for Trump after Sanders was taken off the ballot by the Democratic establishment. So these are people that, if there's a left populist alternative, might be wooed. So we should not, write them off as a lost cause. We need to woo them.
Okay. Thank you.
Dear Nancy, we are nearly closing this interview. So I would like to ask you a personal question. You are those contemporary writers who analyze the war, who understand the war, who reflects about the war. I would like to ask you, what worries you the most at the moment when you watch the news, when you see social media?
Well, a week or two ago, I would have said global heating, but now I have to say World War III. I'm talking about after the war against Iran and the way this is so completely out of control. This has become a new level of scariness in a very immediate sense.
Dogs or cats?
Ducks?
Or cats?
Ducks or cats? I'm sorry, I don't understand the question.
What do you prefer?
What do you prefer?
What do you prefer?
Dog or cat?
Cats.
Or pet?
I'm not particularly, I don't have a cat, so I'm not a cat person exactly. I'm not a childless cat lady, as J.D. Vance would say. I do have ducks in my pond, but they actually make a lot of mess, so I'm not so fond of them. I'm not sure. Why are you asking me?
Because in Mexico, you are team cat or you're team dog for pets.
I'm team democratic socialism. I don't fit the.
Okay, I will do another question like that.
Yes.
Do you prefer coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Okay.
that I have a clear answer to. Okay.
Marx or Gramsci?
Marx or Gramsci?
Yeah.
Oh, well, I think that they go together. Yeah, horse and carriage, they go together. Yeah.
Nancy, what is more difficult to theorizing about capitalism or trying to fix it?
For me, criticizing is easier than fixing, but I realize the importance of fixing and need to work hard at it.
Well, one last question. It's not a question, but it's we ask to you, what message would you send to younger generations?
Think, read, don't believe the BS, and and open yourself to other people and to other perspectives who could turn out to be important allies for you in your struggles.
Dear Nancy, thank you so much for visiting us here at UNAM. we arranged this visit 2 years ago, and we are finally materializing. On behalf of our Dean, Sonia Venegas, thank you so much for being here with us.
Well, thank you for inviting me and hosting me, and thanking all of you for this very stimulating conversation, and please, the Dean, for organizing such a terrific feminist form of a law school. No, I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Roberto.
Thank you, Nancy.
Muchísimas gracias por estar con nosotros. Por favor, estar atentos para los demás capítulos. Gracias.
Nos esperamos.
Hasta la próxima.
Hasta la próxima.
Porque toda crisis nos empuja a una nueva era, este podcast Entre el orden y el caos es un espacio donde el pensamiento crítico y el debate de las ideas son aliados para reflexionar y cuestionar sobre nuestros tiempos.